Good evening. Welcome to Reloved Guitars on this summer's evening. Well, we call it summer because actually out there it looks pretty summery. But it was raining like mad last night. And yeah, so it's summer, but it's doing the British thing. So we're almost in June. And it's still refusing to give us any sort of sunny, warm, dry days in a row. But hey, that is Britain for you. So look, what we've got here is Rich's daughter's, and I can't remember her name, Rich's daughter's Fender made in Mexico Stratocaster. And just the name made in Mexico and a maple board fills me with horror, because I'm hoping this will be free from any of the old-fashioned nightmare of this finish falling off. There's been a batch of these guitars that I've had. Well, a couple over the years, which have the finish on the neck has fallen off when doing the fret leveling or the polish out part. Anyway, I'm not going to kind of panic about it. I'm going to trust that it isn't one of that batch. So we've got a nice, I can't remember this colour, but it's a sort of pretty greeny, olive green, well, not quite even that, but it's a nice colour, green. It probably has a proper name, but I'm sorry I don't know it. The good old Fender engraved tuners, everything you'd expect, including, you know, the kind of chamfered bridge block. So this thing is actually already fairly well set up, but we're going to upgrade the string tree, the nut. We're going to do a little tiny bit of fret leveling. We're going to set the tremolo into down only mode, and we're going to tighten the jack, and also check the pickup mounting. These feel a bit loose to Rich, so I'm going to see if a little bit of foam in here or something will kind of help these. Maybe some foam on the underside of the pickup might just stop it rattling around a bit. Anyway, so the kind of normal practice is, or what we're going to do is we're going to fit an adjustable nut, which I've started preparing here. Obviously I'll need to get it down to the exact size. For that I'm going to have to remove the existing nut, which I suppose I could start out by doing now. And of course I've got my notes because I'd like to just keep an eye on. Oh, actually I know what I'm doing, so I don't need that. Yeah, so we've got two cameras running for the first time in a while. So removing the, let me do something else. Before I do that, I guess I'm going to just zoom out a second, maybe. Let's just zoom out, boink. What I'm going to do before that is I'm going to lock this bridge down into the shut position. So for that I'm going to take off and find my screwdriver. We're going to remove the back plate and tighten up the tremolo screws and just turn it into a hard tail for the time being. And that means we'll be doing the setup as a hard tail. Now, having briefly played this guitar to check it out, I don't anticipate finding anything wrong with it. So we have the tremolo claw screws are very far out. We've got 3 screws. Note, by the way, you know how people come onto your channels and whatnot and tell you that you mustn't put the screws into this spread pattern, the W pattern or whatever you might call this here. You know, you've ever had people come and tell you that? I've had people come on YouTube and tell me it's very wrong to do that. And kind of amusingly, look, it's done like that from the factory, because I don't think this has ever been adjusted. In fact, judging by the quality condition of these screws, I don't think anyone's put a screwdriver in there before. So all looks incredibly new and fresh under here. So I'm just setting these down to what I hope will be flat, although I'm wondering whether this is slightly pressed down at the front here. Let's just do a bit more in the way of putting the springs, tightening the springs. So I have a feeling that these front bits here are definitely not allowing the thing to come down flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back these off a tiny fraction here. See if I can make this sit back down where we want it. Yeah, I think that's where. Yeah, straight away that's down flat. Okay, so that was a problem. Too much over tightened on the front for a start. Okay, yeah. So the tremolo on these Fenders, or the Fender basic tremolo, which is an incorrectly named thing. It isn't a tremolo, it's a vibrato system. But the Fender vibrato system is much criticised, and people say it doesn't work, and that, you know, nobody wants to use it. They sort of lock their tremolos down either by putting a block in there or by pulling these claws right the way in to overpower the strings and effectively hardtail it. But actually, my experience has been that if you get your nut right, get the right material nut, for example, Tusq, and you get the change that to a Tusq one, and then if you fully stretch out your strings before attempting to play the first time when you put new strings on, this tremolo is capable of working really well, and it won't put the guitar out of tune. So it's not really the tremolo that causes the guitar to be out of tune. Now, in a way, I'm getting tangled here in my. God, what have I just done? Yeah, it's when the guitar goes out of tune, it's the fault of the nut and the slack, unreleased slack in the strings. But the tremolo will help that put the guitar out of tune. But it's technically speaking, it's not the tremolo's fault. The tremolo just helps it go out of tune. But the point being is, if you get the nut right and you get the unreleased slack taken out of your strings to begin with, then you can use the tremolo and it won't put the guitar out of tune. So that's what I guess I'm trying to point out, that it's not the tremolo itself, it's the other factors. Now we have here this horrible little metal butterfly thing, which is pretty crappy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this with the Tusq one, and to do that I just want to slightly widen the hole that we go into, so that we don't run any risk of splitting the wood. This isn't actually the right size, so the right size is not here either. Did I put it out of the way? If I was clever, I would have put it out of the way so I knew where. And I think I remember thinking to myself, do you know that? I almost think I remember thinking to myself, oh yeah, this is the piece, you better put this out of the way so you can find it next time. And then I didn't. So excuse me, noise. Okay, so that's just right. It's going to put this now out there on its own thing. What am I talking about? I've put it on a magnet to keep it safe. Right, sorry, I'm blethering as usual. So here we have, start as we mean to go on, the new the new Tusq String 3, which will do a much better job than the existing one. Now this bone nut here, I'm afraid to tell you, is I'm going to take it off using a drill or a cutting disc. So it seems a bit of a kind of extreme thing to do, but when you are working with this type of slot, you really do need to make sure that you get the nut out without damaging the wood around it. So what I'm just doing here is I'm just scratching, scraping the joint where the nut sits, in case there's any finish that is likely, oh sorry, it's going to try and flake off. So I tend to like to, I don't know if you can see that still, just about, yeah, I tend to like to start by just putting a little scratch on here, and then the other side. Doing this won't help the nut come out. What it will do is it will just limit the amount of finish that breaks off when you take the nut out, which will stop it. If it wants to propagate all around the neck there, it won't now. So we're going to make a bit of noise and a bit of dust any second now. You can see what we're doing. Get the old Proxon, summon the Proxon. Now I must remember, I'm going to write this on the board because I have to take this home. Claire has asked me to bring home the Proxon. Ta-da, Proxon. Home. Home is the Proxon. And I need 3mm dowels, bit. 3mm dowels and bit. Ash. Got the glue at home. Right, that's all I needed to know. So here we go. No. Now here we go. Now somebody commented the other day on YouTube and said something like, oh my god, this is not for real, that can't be a Fender because he's actually cutting, hand holding a rotary tool like this, like it was some kind of crime. Okay, so if you're holding a rotary tool, right, and you've used one before and you're confident how you use it, right, you're going to know that me doing this isn't going to accidentally slip off and cut its way through the neck and break the whole guitar. Now, that fact will only apply if you do have the confidence to do it. Now this doesn't smell of bone, so this is probably corian, whatever they call that stuff. So yeah, and you know, there are some people who do get mighty freaked out when you do something with a tool close to their precious Fender. No, actually, sorry, not there. It's people who bring me guitars, trust me to do this, and it's people who just see it out of the blue on YouTube that get totally freaked out. And you know, that's fine. A lot of people, I guess, project themselves onto it, and maybe they wouldn't feel safe or trust themselves doing it. That's okay, I understand that. But if you've done it plenty of times before and you know what you're doing, then you know, there's no reason why I would get scared each time. So this breaks off a few bits of it to begin with, and they're very well glued in usually, so my objective at the moment would be more or less to just keep going down to reduce this down to split the two parts of the bass. So I'm still a millimetre or so off to carry on. So when you go down cutting with that, there is one factor that you can't decide on, you can't know, is if you cut into the wood slightly below that. And usually you do a tiny little bit, but you'll see that that doesn't have any negative impact, because from this point onwards the what do we call it, the nut will sit on there with no problem at all. Obviously it won't sit just yet because it's the wrong size to begin with, but also it won't sit because it is far too big, so we're going to have to reduce this nut a long way to make it work as an adjustable nut. So I'm just looking at this here, and I'm going to just dial back these grub screws for a minute to very short. Now the idea is when you use one of these nuts, you'll put it in like this when it's the right thickness, and you'll be able to drop it in, and then I'm going to be able to mark the point where the grub screws will sit. So to begin with, I'm just going to, I don't know how much you can see there, that's what the mirror's for. Let's zoom out a bit. Thank you. So I'm going to start by sanding this back a little bit until we're at the correct thickness for the slot, and it probably only has to be a very small amount, but it typically will start off being too wide front to back, so quite often we need to do this, thinning it down a little bit front to back. Now if we're going to take any more than about what I've just done there, we'd be advised to do it from both sides at once. So again, I just place that down there and come at it from the other side. This is because the grub screws are central in the body of the nut, so if we're going to take material off it, we want to do it equally across both sides. So the nut now is just about, it's a little stiff, tight, so it's just about fitting, and I'm just going to take a little bit more off the back side, and then once it's the right front to back thickness, which is sort of looks like it is there, I'm just going to place it where I want it, which interestingly is fractionally off compared to the USA. How about that? That's really telling. What I'm just going to do, by the way, is I'm going to first of all take off the little footer on this nut using the same Proxon tool, if I can get the thing. This has been fighting me a little bit to release the, what I have to do last time, I have to tap it out. No, this is not fantastic. So I end up having to tap the thing out, which I really prefer not to have to do. Bear with me a second. Bear with me. How do I put that on there? Hold it in there. No, I can't very well, can I? Oh. Hold on a minute. No, it doesn't want to do it. That's no blame use. This, I've spent about 20 minutes unhooking this earlier on. I think I can get it done now. Thank you. It wasn't very helpful, and probably it'll get stuck again when I put this sanding drum thing on, but anyway, I think it's time for a new one. So we'll put the sanding drum on, and the sanding drum will be good for just taking off the little footer on this Tusq nut. So since we've got a curved nut slot, we're going to want to take off this little foot. Now we have to do it very carefully, so I prop that up in there, and I'm just going to hold it and do it with my, move the piece, not the drill. So it just lets me bring the piece up to the spinny thing, and then I've got me a fairly smooth curved base. Now since we're making it adjustable anyway, the curvedness of the base isn't the main, the most important thing in the world. That's still a little bit wide at one end. Yeah, so it's not critical to get it perfectly straight, or curved, I mean, because we've got a bit of leeway on this, but once we get get it to the right size. Now I'm going to just dial these little feet back a bit. All I want is the little thing sticking through. And the words being the pointy bit of the grub screw. Now I'm just going to hold that in place for a minute, move the sanding thing out of the way and bring this back into focus. So there's where the nut is going to sit. You can sort of see it there. And I just need to basically line it up where I think its correct positioning is going to be. And I think it's better with the a little bit more space on the high E, I think, and maybe a little bit on each end actually. Yeah, go flush on the high E end of it. So that's where I want it to sit. Now to get it to do that, I'm going to now use the pointy bits to just tap down there and tap down there. And that tapping down gives me two marks to work to. One there, oops, and one there. And what I'll do then is I'll get a drill bit, a sort of couple of drill bits if I can find the right ones, and the aim will be, too big, aim it will be to just make a little depression, oh god, a little depression in the base of the slot, and that it will be for the, that's never the one I want, right here, make a little depression for the feet to sit into, just to locate them. There's a bigger one. Is that the right one? Is that bigger? No, it's the same size. Always the way. Come on. Because I'm going to need to find this 3mm one anyway to take back to Claire. You know that. But I guess I'll have to use this one, which is going to be slightly bigger. Yes. Right. So either we'll start with this one, and I put the thing there, and I'm basically just going to very carefully finger drill, as I call it, a little dent. And if I don't know what it feels like, I can get, because it's in Mayport, it's very light, I can get this and go, right, there's a little divot, that's cool. And I'm going to get the same one, or get one in place there, and I'm going to gently make myself a little recess. This one is a little bit harder to do, because I think it's starting slightly in the wrong place. I'm just going to encourage it along. So it's very light. I'm not cutting down as much at all. I'm just trying to just give it a sort of place to seat. And then a way of checking it is to get your nut. Now this nut is still currently the wrong height. But I'm getting the nut now, and I'm sitting in there, and that doesn't move side to side or anything. What we do have is a fair amount to remove from the far edge, for which I'll just do a tiny little mark on there so we can see what the cut back needs to be on this side. You can see that there's a fair bit. Now, having made my mark, what I'm also going to do, I'm just going to compress, if I can find the right thing, I'm going to compress, use this to compress a little bit of a mark in here. And is that too wide? Yeah, it is fractionally. I'll use another one, if I can find it. Sharper shaped one. Sharper shape. No, that's also okay. Maybe I won't use either of those then. There's a masonry bit, but isn't what I want. I was looking for a sort of spiky thing that I could just press down in, that was a sort of flattish. But the truth is, I'm not going to find one, I don't think, because everything is either a bit too big or a bit too spiky. Maybe this would do. Let's try that one. Yeah, that's better. Let's give me a bit of a better go. There we are. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these all the way in. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll take these out first. I'll do the work on them in a minute. Because the thing I want to do now is get the height right. The idea will be to get this down small enough so that we can basically when we seat it in here like this, we end up with the strings resting on the first fret. Now that's seated perfectly there, that's seated perfectly there. We can do a sort of initial test like this, and we go, actually it's still a fair bit too tall. Now this is actually quite snug. We'll lift it out carefully. The bit we've got to do is guess how much has got to come out. And that can be quite tricky. So, to begin with, let's take a bit off the end, and let's get, what's this, the 9.5 inch, there we are. So first of all I'm going to bring back I'll take back this end as much as possible. This will be a little bit crude, maybe not entirely straight, but that's okay, because what I'll do then is I will put it on this block here, and I will bring it into the correct shape by using this 9.5 inch radius thing, yes, and then I'll round this off too, which means we should have a nice rounded end, and everything should be not sharp. Okay, so that should be about the correct length. We can just put it back in again and feel. No, it's about right. Maybe a tiny bit more. Okay, so the next part of it is how much do we need to take off, so that when we begin with the strings on here, they are seated on the first fret. So I think it has to be a bit. Now the question is, do we do it by slow wearing down, which would be using this block and working it away similar fashion to this, or a mixture of that plus end to end sounding like this, which is pretty effective either which way. You can come at it from both sides. Maybe difficult to keep the edge, the bottom angle exactly square, so then I sort of switch back to holding it in one place and doing it. But this is a very slow way of reducing it, so it depends how much we feel it's got to come off. We place it back in there again. Once again, test it. Now what we want to do, whether we're using a sort of a solid fixed nut or whether we're using an adjustable as we are in this case, we still want to take this down enough to begin with. With a case of, if we're using an adjustable nut, we can actually afford to take this down below its ideal height, because we can use the grub screws to bring it up, is the point I'm trying to make. If we're just doing it as a fixed nut in position, then obviously we have to get it absolutely precise, so we'd have the strings on and ready to go as our guide. But in this case we're using the adjustable function. And all I need to know to begin with is that when the strings are on, and I can put one of these back on now since we've already got rid of the original nut. So if I do this one back up, very coiled original old wire, so it's going to be quite difficult to get this through the hole and to bite. Let's try that. Let's come back through the hole. Right, stay on there for a minute, please. Okay. So if I just get the two E's on for a second, I can use them. Okay, so this one, right down on its feet, tells me there's a fair bit of distance left, or height left. And I'll just get this one on to double check. And that's a good guide to tell how much I've got to do, because I just basically want to end up with these, with things like this, everything like this, and I want this to be touching. This, actually the treble side feels to be too high by comparison. Either way, we take this off and we continue to take it down in height. So if I want to take some off the treble side now, I can kind of concentrate on that side a bit more, as I'm doing here. And then once I've done a bit of extra push on the treble side, I can put it back on here and continue doing both sides the same amount, hopefully. And again, we just put it back in, push it into place, put the strings on, tighten them up. A little tiny bit of hangover still on the bass side, which we can take care of. Okay, still above the fret, still above the fret. So sometimes I judge, when I judge there's a certain amount to take off, sometimes I'll get the Dremel out and just partially run this down on the Dremel, but the problem with that is that it can be too aggressive and cost too much. So I'm going to concentrate on doing it this way around, a mixture of sort of direct sanding like this, followed by dragging it to square it off like so. It's a little bit difficult to hold on to. There is a little block I can use that Bob made with this whole arrangement of these little kits. It actually is quite nifty to use, and they help you to hold these hold the nut in place while you sand away like this. But I'm just doing it by hand. Something about holding on to it is my preference. I sort of can feel what I'm doing a little bit better. So, okay, we're still high at the treble end. Getting there, nearly there on the bass end. So let's say we want to help it along, and let's say I don't feel like I've got all the time in the world. So what I can do is I can just get this running, and I can just give myself a little push. Now this is unguided. I'm just guessing at how much to take off here. And partly I'm doing this because, crudely, without measuring, because I've got quite a lot of leeway since I'm doing it as an adjustable nut. So now I'm just going to concentrate on bringing that back into a nice 9.5 inch radius shape. And actually, it's not too far off. Come at it from this side. So the radius kind of works both ways, that way or across the way, whichever we need to do. So taking a little bit extra off with, or a bit more fiercely, remove some materials with the Dremel sanding drum, and then just evening it out, hopefully, with the sanding block. Of course, I can take the sandpaper off here and replace it with some new stuff whenever I need to. So this should now be floating, or should put the strings right bang on the first fret, which is where I want them, or potentially a little bit more, but that's okay. Just fractionally off both of them. So it's still not quite there, which is absolutely fine. We just keep going. But it does sort of show you how small the nut actually has to be when it comes down to, when you get it down to the size for an adjustable nut. Very, very small. And the reason I use an adjustable nut is because, for me, the point of using Tusq is, first and foremost, it's got the built-in lubrication, which is critical for this tuning stability in conjunction with stretching the strings fully out. The other aspect of it is that my aim is to use make sure we use the slots as they came from the factory without being cut with files. So people spend a load of money on files, and I did when I started doing this, and that's all very well, but when you look at a guitar nut under the microscope, then you find that your slots that you make with the expensive files you've bought, despite how careful you go, they still leave a slightly sort of shaggy slot, because they're not the most precise things in the world. And the point is, you when you have a nut like this, the nut from the factory comes with factory molded slots. So my view on it is that I want to use those for the maximum smoothness and lack of friction. Let me try and use the unmolested factory slots, as I refer to them. Now, to do that, that means I have to get the still a tiny bit too long. To do that, I have to not. It means I don't want to be cutting the slots with files. What I want to be doing is bringing the nut itself up to the correct target height, and that's why I do it as an adjustable nut. And consequently, by making it adjustable, we get to benefit from the factory slots, which are as the god of Tusq intended. There is such a thing. So now I'm just double checking the width on either side. We want it to be nice and smooth. It's just a whiff of extra space there, but it's almost perfectly done to size. Okay, so having done, it was all a bit fiddly, but now having got to the correct size, if I now put this, let's put the put these fellows back in first. Actually, let's do something else. I'm going to put the nut in place. I'm already pretty convinced that we'll have got it to the right height now. But before I do that, I'm going to put the grub screws that I used originally to mark the position. I'm going to wind them all the way in, bar a millimetre, barely a millimetre sticking out at either end. Then I'm going to cut them flush as I can under here, like so. And I'm going to cut them on the other one. Come along, you can do it. These are a bit knackered, these old pliers, but then I've got myself short screws ready to do some action. Now I want them to be, I want to get rid of these gnarly bits here, and I don't want pointy bits, so I'm going to gently sand them down again on this radius block, because I need the radius part of this in play. Sometimes, if you're not careful, they'll sort of wobble their way back up, wind their way back in, so you have to sort of try and check them and make sure they're still sticking out, because what I'm trying to do here is just using the radius is to get these to a sort of flattened flush cut, and they do try and unwind, reset themselves. They sort of wobble their way back in into the hole. So I'm trying to get them, poke them through a bit more, and then use the radius to sand them nice and smooth. And it takes a little while, but you get there in the end. And once you've got that, you'll end up with fairly well flattened out feet, which I'll just do a little bit more here. And the idea of having these grub screws with slightly flattened feet is I don't want them digging further into the wood. So the idea is to spread the weight of the string load. And this one is really trying to annoy me. I'm trying to hold on to it long enough to get a nice flattened feet. God, it's really... Okay, well they're rounded off, that's good enough. So finally I then back these up into the thing, into the nut, so they're recessed, so they're not doing any lifting work at the moment. And then once they're in there, I now put the nut back into place here, squeeze it nicely in line, put the strings on, the first two strings on it, and then I'm going to tighten them up a little bit. Now at the moment they could move, it can still move because there's nothing, there's no grub screw sticking through. And if I could just hold on to these things for more than a second, and once I put the grub screw through, it will find its footing inside the little hole, the little recess, and then it will not want to go any further to the side. So there's my, alright, there's me nut in place and sticking up as much, nearly as much as I want. Thinking about where it's actually seated, there's still probably a tiny bit more of that base end of the nut to take off, but I can do that later on. It's a very, very small amount. But meanwhile, oh, before I do that, so I now know I've got the nut right. Shall we take that bit off the end while we're at it? Let's do that. Let's do that. Right, so let's put that in there and just line it up. You're happy where you are, sort of there. Very close indeed. God, it's hard to handle. Too hard to handle. Right, so I'm just making very small final tweaks. Let's have a look how we're doing. And rounding this off so it doesn't stick in to our hands. Okay, so I'm happy with that. That will locate nicely there. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to mark up, not with this one, I'm going to mark up the frets with the marker pen. This will be for the fret leveling. So you need a steady hand for that. Now, if you mess up and you hit the frets, hit the finish between the frets with this pen. If you are working with a poly finish, which we are on these guitars, then you can actually remove it quite safely with cellulose thinners, because this pen is based on kind of cellulose thinners type of alcohol, and you can clean at the push. I mean, if you so much as make a mistake and slip, you can clean up using cellulose thinners. Okay, so now I'm just going to replace the strings. Go back under there, will you? Thank you. Okay, so we're working on a 9.5 inch radius nut, which we know that the guitar is by default. So at this point now, I've got the fresh, the new nut on, converted to adjustable, and ready to do service. And we're just loading the neck, and in a second we'll tune it all up ready. And then once the neck is tuned up, we'll set the ideal action, and that will be the point at which I'll be ready to do fret leveling. And the thing that makes this setting up this way a little bit different from other ways, I think, the way I would describe it anyway, is that, or let's put it another way. When we were young, we got guitars and we played them. We played them, and what we did was we lowered the action as low as we could get it before it started buzzing and making a horrible noise. And at that point, we then backed off a little bit in terms of lowness, and we accepted. Oh, this one ain't going to play because it's not even sticking. Thank you. Yeah, we did it. We lowered the action until we couldn't lower it anymore, and it buzzed. At which point, that was it. We play with it, and as we all know, most of our first guitars were really high action things. And I suppose it was good in one way that we learned how to do it, but hurtful in other ways. No. Okay, so now I'm going to, let's zoom out a little bit. So now I'm going to, so yeah, the guitars we had when we were kids, we just played what we got. What I decided at some point I wanted to do was to set the action the way I wanted it, and then make the guitar, make the frets work with that, because on our first guitars, it was the frets on the guitar that limited what we could do in terms of setting the action. And so now this setup is all about us choosing what the action should be and making the frets comply with that. And so to do that, if the target action we're after runs into uneven frets, then we either back off like we did when we were kids, or in this case we leave the action there and then we level the frets to make them work with that chosen action. So it's kind of us imposing our will on the guitar frets. Now, what am I going to say? Oh yes, this one here needs adjustment because the action is the neck relief is a little bit curved, so we could flatten it out a little bit. At this point, I'm always busy thinking which is the where is the key that I want to use, and actually it's this one, I think, but this is too. It is this one, but it's too short. So let me just measure it and find out what the actual measurement is in mils. It comes as 469, which is not strictly it's not an imperial one. It's the same as this one, so it's hanging up for a reason. So I'm going to put this one in, and if I get a bite on it, I'm going to just very slightly. I need to put something on here. The green thing will tell me it's Mexico. It's an imperial measure, and we need to know it's that. So there you go. The green sticker of recognition, and it hangs out on a little magnet on the wall. So having done a little bit of clockwise turn, I've reduced the action, the relief down a little bit, but we could probably go a tiny bit more. So, oh look, I've got the green one, found it easily. So in the setup, when we make the guitar or the frets conform to the action we want, the setup, in this setup, I work with three things: the curvature of the neck, the height of the first fret action, and the height of what I call the last fret action, which is set at the bridge. And so I work with three of those things to get them to where I want them. Now this is currently a bit on the low side, and I'm going to get me now the Mexico. This is funny because the Mexico Strat, unless I'm completely mistaken, seems to have does it have a metric bridge? No, it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. It's a US bridge. Stupid me. Anyway, so at the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this for my target last fret action, which is 1.5 millimeters on the low E, and 1.2 on the high E, and then a sort of a gradient spread between the two across the way. So it's a little bit, it's not perfectly exact. It's not rocket science. It's a bit of eyeballing goes on here. So I'm going 1.5, 1.5, but I'm going to lower it fractionally as I go across, and then eventually it will come down to 1.2. But these now, having done the changed the action at the nut and changed the neck relief, the action down here now is a little bit too low, and we're getting there. So we're sub 1 millimeter here, and that's also changed because I've flattened the tremolo as well. So currently it's sub 1 millimeter on the G, which is too low. So I'm going to just bring that up to about 1.3, 1.4, make it work there, and then we'll sort of cruise into 1.2 at the far end. Nearly there. That's not bad. Nearly there. Tiny bit off this far side. Okay, so now I've got the bridge action where I want it. I've got very low first fret action, which will do me for now. Just going to check the tuning again. Right, so now we've set a low light playing action. Now the time has come to get ready to fret level, or precision fret level as I like to call it, because what I'm aiming to do is, using a method that I learned from an old Indian fakir in the Malabar Hills. No, it's not true. I learned it from a tool that has the name of, throw things on the floor, has the name of a katana. Anyway, it's a different approach to fret leveling, and in this approach what we do is we level the frets with the neck curved and the neck under load, and that's a bit of a weird thing. So the first thing you might say to me is, why are you doing that? Why do you want it? Why do you want the neck curved? That seems a weird thing to want. Why and why? What's the purpose of it? Well, actually, I don't want the neck curved particularly. There's no massive thrill for me about the neck being curved. But what I do want is the neck to be loaded with full string tension. And in order to have it loaded with full string tension, what's also going to happen is that it is going to, by definition, be in the playing configuration, which is slightly curved. So I can't load the neck really and have it in its playing configuration without it being curved. So the first kind of challenge to overcome, really, which is what this method does very well, is how can I level a curved neck? Well, by using a curved beam, which is what this thing is. It's a truss rod which we use as a leveling beam. So now I'm able, unlike any other methods, I'm able to level the frets on this guitar while they're under compression. Now, why do I care that they're under compression, from longitudinal compression? Well, that's because the compression of the timber makes the frets sit in slightly different positions. Perfect. And so by leveling it this way, under compression, we're leveling it in the way it will be when you're playing it with the same 9-gauge strings at the same action settings, which I'm going to dial into it, or which we're going to leave it at, or which we have already put onto it actually. So this way of leveling frets, as I say, means that we know that it's been leveled with the compression at play. If you do the conventional method of leveling frets, which is to take the neck off, or sorry, not take it off, to flatten it out perfectly by adjusting the truss rod, and then take the strings off, flatten it, and then level it out, level it. That's all very well. A little bit there. It's all very well, but when you put new strings on it and put the whole neck under pressure again, what you'll find is that the compression slightly changes the shape of the neck and the way the frets sit. So it'll just be slightly off, and you may find it has new buzzes or chokes back in there. I have to say, it's only a small bit more accurate to do it the way I'm doing it. Doing it at all is better than none. So if you haven't leveled the frets, doing it the traditional method is, call it 90% better, or 85% better than not doing it at all. This is only a bit, maybe another 10%. Even that's being a bit generous. But this is this adds a little bit more accuracy. But the real reason, I'll show you the real, let's see if we can recreate something. The real reason I use this method above all other things, yes, it's a little bit more accurate, but let's, okay, hear those, that's the E string choking a little bit as it comes across into the G, what I call the G track. And this is why I like this method better than any other, because as I level in this method, because the strings are on, it makes it very easy for me to stop leveling at the minute I've freed up that little bit of choking, buzzy, or that little zinging I call it, up at this end when I bend the E string right the way across into the G track. So what I hope you'll be able to hear straight away is, with a little bit of leveling, and this is a very mild leveling I'm doing on this, but with this, just this little bit of leveling, I'm hoping now you'll be able to hear that choking is almost gone. That's as near as damn it gone. So that's why it's the best method, because I can hear when it's cleared up the thing I'm challenging, trying to clear up, and then I can stop as soon as it's playing well at the action I've set, and then I know I don't have to do any more. Other methods, you don't have that, because the strings aren't on, you can't test and see if it's improved the way you want it to. So you have to sort of do it to an arbitrary level. You keep on doing it in the hope that it's it's leveled it out enough to play well, and then you put your strings back on and discover it has or hasn't, and you may need to do some more. Now often I get into a situation where I stop. I'm very averse to wasting fret metal, so quite often I will stop earlier than I need to, and I call it chickening out really, in order to preserve fret life. And sometimes I will go back and do a second leveling if I've not been courageous enough in the first time round. But the good thing about this is, doing it this way you can always hear, so you're much less likely to stop too soon, but equally you're much less likely to take too much. So again, and it's a really good method that tells you where the high spots are. So I can see there's some high spots here, or particularly here and right at the end here, but not so much anywhere else. And the dust is showing us that we've leveled out those frets, and they will play better as a result of that. And so I'm going through, as I go through each track, from the E track through to the high E track, through to the low E track, each time I move across a track, I'm recalibrating the neck. Remember, it's still in the same playing configuration as we want to play it in. And sometimes as you move across the tracks, you'll find that the curvature changes a very slight amount. And recalibrating between each track is a great way to just adjust and make sure we're leveling at exactly the right place on this side of the neck as you go across. Now, one of the things that I've found in the past is that it's quite natural for the E, low E and the A strings to have what's called fret slap, what I call fret slap. In fact, that's very good. A little bit there, up to about there. So on the low E, I'm picking up what I call fret slap. It's not like an individual high fret that's choking out a note or causing a buzzing or anything. It's a kind of slight buzz accompanying a whole slew of frets in a line, and that's what I've chosen to call fret slap. And it means that the general slightly curviness of the neck is just not leaving enough room for the string, the big wound string, which needs more space to move. It's not got quite enough room to spin freely. And so what I do is, instead of leveling to remove with my mind fixed on a single fret that's sticking up, I level with a sort of overall neck smoothness in mind. So the idea is I really want this neck to, I want it to, if there's light undulations, I want the tool to kind of even those out, and that evening those out tends to free up a little bit more space. Still a little bit up here, so I can hear it. It's still accompanying. So what I'll do is I'm just going to focus more on this end up here, and with the low E you've also got to try and remember to come right to the edge as well as the fingerboard kind of rolls off, so will the frets need to. So I'm just looking for freeing up that extra bit of space so we don't get that fret slap. Now, that's really a product of low actions. When you have higher actions, of course, you don't suffer from fret slap the same way, because in the height, the extra height of the action at both ends, there's much more room. That's nice. It's better there. Do a little tiny bit more down this end and then we're done. So with an experienced ear, I can hear it equaling things out and easing up what I call the slap. And it's quite subtle and quite limited, but it really helps to make the experience of playing smoother. Okay, so once I've done that, I will just retune for a sample. Lovely, feeling absolutely nice. Yeah, interesting. I chose to align it a little bit this side over here because the alignment's perfect at this end, and we've got a little bit more space at this end for the high E, which is typically the one you want a bit more room on to do that with, whereas you tend to be pulling downwards on this one, so you don't need as much vibrato, that thing where you make the notes warble. Yeah, that must be vibrato. Anyway, so that's that done. So there's the fret leveling done, amazingly, just like that. So the guitar now has been tamed. Obviously it's mucky, it needs some cleaning, and it needs the frets re-profiling and, or recrowning, that's another way of putting it. It needs the frets recrowning, and it needs them sanding and polishing out. So what I'm going to do first of all is take all the old strings off, because now they've done their service and we can bin them. well, sometimes they just give up the ghost like that and break, because it's had enough being done to and fro, which is fair enough. They lived long enough to do what I needed of them. Bloody sharp bits. So this is the bit that scares me on the maple necked guitars, quite obviously. It's the getting ready to mask this off the fingerboard, because it's at this point I know that the finish, no thanks for catching, the finish will either come off or stay on. And you know, 98% of the Mexican Strats, the finish will stay on. But there is that strange little batch, unhappy and unlucky batch that seemed to have problems, and it was an adhesion problem from the having to repeat myself for just a tiny percentage, but it's important because I had to, you know, make it, point it out to Rich that even though it's a very slight chance of it, I still need to let him know, because if it does, if it is one of the 2%, I'm making the number up, it's a very small percentage, but if it's one of those very small percentages, then we're kind of stuck having to refinish the knackered part. So now you can see that the adjustable nut can come out for the time being, and so can the string tree, just so that we can clean the headstock up and make it nice and shiny. So I'll just take those out. I'm just brushing off some surface dust for now. We'll clean everything after I've done the sanding part, because we're going to make more dust in the process. But what I'm going to do is take my low tack masking tape, and there, here we go. We go right, fingers crossed, we put it on here and away we go. Now, I've tried in the past when I've been doing poly finish that I'm nervous about, I try to perhaps not wrap it round the sides so much. I don't want it gripping onto the sides. So you probably see on this one I'll just leave it sticking out rather than wrapping it round. But the truth is, if it's going to come off, it will come off whether we've wrapped it round or not. I guess I'm just trying to be a little bit more cautious. So what I do on this is I'm masking this up to protect the maple finish, or the lacquer, I should say, the gloss finish on top of the maple. And then I will show myself recrowning the frets. And recrowning just means when you've flattened a fret out slightly, in the process of leveling it, when you flattened it out, you've put a flat spot on it, quite literally. So you've taken it down to the right height by means of, or by virtue of putting a bit of a flat spot on there to reduce its height to the correct amount. And that means you've changed it from its original fret shape, because the fret was normally an arch shape when looked at from the side. So now we need to reshape it, and the way we do it is with this crowning file, which is concave, and it goes over the fret, and it basically grinds or files off the edges of any flat spot that we've just made in the leveling process. And so in doing that, it returns the profile of the fret to more of a arch shape, the correct shape, and then we sand that off and polish it out, and then you've got the correct height in a fret that's the correct height, and it's also the correct shape that we want it in for playing properly. Because when you have it the correct arch shape, it means the top of the fret is the peak, and the string sits right on the top of the center of the fret. If it's a flat spot and you don't recrown it, then the string launch point moves forward from its being in the center of the fret, midline. It moves forward to the front edge of it, and it messes up the intonation slightly, which is what we don't want. So recrowning makes the fret, restores the correct intonation to the fret, as well as making it feel better to play. But we can do all of that and it can still be a pretty scratchy fret. So once we've recrowned it, we then have to polish the frets out and restore them to as shiny as possible condition for play. And I tend to do that with a series of papers that range from 400, 600, 1000, 1500, and then I switch to micromesh sheets ranging from 1500 through 9 stages up to 12,000, which is pretty light gauge. And once that's done, then it's time to clean everything up and we're ready to go. Now with this one, I know for a fact that the jack socket is wobbly, so I'm going to take that out and redo it and make sure nothing's broken under there, or nothing's weakened, I should say. And then we'll just see if we can find a way of steadying these pickups so they're not quite rattling around quite so disconcertingly. In the old days, you would have had pickups with 2 fixing points, at least on one side, and you were able to, they were given to you so you could tilt it forwards and backwards a little bit. As far as I understand, that's what it was for. But they no longer have those, so the pickup sits anchored in one position, which tends to leave a lot of wobble room, which a lot of people don't like. Now, this is not quite ready yet, so I'm going to hang this up out of the way, but not before getting out my tape board, and I'm going to put some tape here and cut it into thin strips, which we need for the last stages of the masking tape process. You can see I've used this board for quite some time and it's sort of worn out. What are we on? Long shots? Oh yeah, we are. So boring long shots, but hey. So to make me some new thin strips, I get a couple of full-size strips on here. Sorry about the noise. I hadn't realised that this tape noise is actually louder than anything else on my videos. I'm trying to shut it up a bit, but it's difficult. Okay, then I get me ruler and start slicing this up. It's not massively accurate, but it usually cuts the pieces thin enough to use effectively. Stay. So I have to sort of guesstimate 3 little thin sections and then cut along. Now, of course, often you can find that the piece of tape isn't on there in a straight line. It can be buckled, and then you get weird pieces of tape, fat in the middle and thin at the ends. And so somewhere from all of this, I hope to find 3 useful strips. Now, at this point, I can't even tell where I did the last cut. It's such a screwed up board, so I could really do with the new board, but hey. So I was thinking today as I drove up here, a couple of hours ago now, I was thinking how lucky I am to have been able to have a couple of hours reading to my missus in the hammock in the sunshine, and then to get in my remains of a little old car and to drive up here and do 2 or 3 hours, or 4 in this case, on, it's something I enjoy doing, at my own pace, or a pace that's good for me. Yeah, and I just thought how remarkably lucky that is, or how grateful I am, blessed I am for being able to do that. So at this point I'm going to try and get me some bits of tape that work the correct size. Yes, but it was one of those gratitude moments, and of course also not being directly involved in a horrible conflict as is going on in Ukraine. Really don't know what to make of that at the moment. I think there's a feeling sometimes when you watch reports that the Western American commentators are very bullish about Ukraine's performance. And by all accounts it's been remarkable compared to what was originally projected and people thought was going to happen. But the thing that worries me for Ukraine's safety and future is that the Russian history of the Russian kind of army is one of, how would I put it, readiness to spend millions of lives to achieve its aim, as it did in the Second World War. And it's a question of, you can keep supplying Ukraine for a long time with arms, but if Ukraine runs short on fighting men, then it's doomed. Because if there's one thing I'm pretty confident of, it's the Russians won't ever. And it's a terrible thing to say, because the poor kids that have been thrown into this war by the Russians don't deserve what they're having put in front of them. But the one thing we can be sure of is that in the history of Russia, it's never shied away from expending lives in its pursuit of its case in the Second World War, I suppose, its survival as a motherland. But even more in this case, for what Putin wants to achieve. And I suppose there's a part of it that sort of says that the longer it goes on, the more embroiled he is, or Russia is, as a result of its duration and how much has been expended so far in human lives. The less likely it is to come to any kind of timely. 3 months and counting is not timely by whichever standard you look at it, but I guess people are saying the longer he's in it, the harder it is going to be for him to stop doing it, and that worries me, because if it is literally an endless war of attrition, then Russia will win in the end, because it doesn't seem to play by any normal standard that seeks to preserve infrastructure or cities or anything, human capital or anything that's been done before. People sort of say, well, what are they going to capture if they when they win the whole of Ukraine or the whole of that corridor? Well, we already know nothing, probably nothing in the way of human life, no citizens, and certainly no infrastructure and no buildings, nothing worth having other than land. And that is not something that computes, I think, with the Western sensibility. But actually, I'm afraid that Putin sees that as a reasonable return on his investment. And I say that lightly. What I mean is the investment of those lives that he's prepared to spend to get this outcome. So I think something has to change out kind of radically if this isn't going to go on. So a bit kind of gloomy about it, I have to tell you. Right, before I go off camera, which I will do in a minute, just to do all this sanding because it's noisy and boring, I'm just going to look on here while we take a quick look at the state of the jack socket, which has come undone. Now what I can't do at the same time is lift that up because I've covered this over, but we'll maybe look at that afterwards. In terms of these things bouncing around, I think a piece of foam glued to the underside of one just to keep it one way or the other, or maybe 2 bits of foam, stop it bouncing around would be good. So here we have your bog standard jack socket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off a second, like so, and I'm going to put a tiny drop of low strength thread lock on it, and I learned the hard way not to use anything other than the low strength one, because if you do, you'll never get it undone again without chopping it to pieces. But a bit of low strength thread lock for a piece like this that's off, you know, by definition is in danger of coming undone through endless constant use. Then, no, hang on, wait a minute, we're missing that probably doesn't help, we're missing a washer. Hey Fender, what's going on, man? Here's your washer, baby. Right, let's try and find one of big enough size to do the job. Okay, maybe one, no, maybe no, maybe no. Maybe not ideal, maybe I'll try this gold one, just as something to give it a little bit of extra grip, because otherwise there's none at all in there. So let's add that. Yeah, so I found out the hard way trying to keep these together, that if you're not careful you can put the wrong thread lock on and it's forever locked. But this low strength stuff is pretty good. You can break it when you need to, but it'll resist a sort of casual undoing caused by vibration and stuff. Now, one thing I learned the hard way too in these guitars is that's the correct way for your jack plug socket to align with its back becoming part of the back of this boaty thing. You do it the other way around, it'll often, not always, but often prevents the jack socket from going in all the way. Now this isn't a great tool for doing this, but I'm going to just do it this time because I have to. Yeah, so align the back of the jack with the back of the boat, if you get what I mean. Right. So that's that taken care of. Good. And that will start drying away as we do everything else. Okay, so I'm going to shut this off now, do all the polishing part, and I will listen to the radio, get something to drink, and then I'll come back at the point when I'm going to have a quick look under the hood, see if we can stop those pickups from wobbling around, and then we'll be on into cleaning up. This bridge is a bit mucky, so I might take this apart and clean up as well. So there we go. Alright, see you in a minute. So here we are, shined up. A little bit of padding behind these to get them padded. Bridge off and shined up a bit. I don't quite know where the actual position of this bridge should be just yet, but we'll find it in a minute when we come to intonation. I'm just doing a sort of rough estimate of where everything should be. And so next, what I forgot to do on camera was I forgot to do the recrowning, which I've done, and then I did the polishing, and now it's ready to restring and stretch the strings out and intonate, which is the sort of last bit of the game. So I'm going to just set this to zoom out And you can see from here, I suppose. Not the best view, sorry. But I'm just going to load up. It's running a bit later now, so also given the overall whole guitar a clean. So we're just going to restring. Everything's looking better. Cleaned, leveled, lowered, and the bridge currently set to down only, and I will check, we'll just set it to its limits, because when you do a down only you just need the springs to be just enough to hold the bridge down with everything under its correct load. So we'll get it tuned up and stretched out and intonated, and then we'll just take the bridge the bridge screws, slack them just to the point where they will stay, you can bend strings and it won't lift the back of the bridge, but where you'll have the lightest possible downward action with a tremolo arm, which is the best of both worlds, and it's where I always recommend it if people expressly aren't absolutely certain that they want to have a fully floating trem, which isn't often the case for most people. Now, one thing I'm just going to do, once I've put this, what's this thing called? String tree in place, I'm just going to check these tuners, make sure they're done up, because they do often come undone over the years, months, weeks, years. There you go. Done up, done up, done up. Now, because I'm putting on an adjustable nut, here's what I recommend. When you're restringing with an adjustable nut, I recommend that you, something like that. Yeah, you start, before you put the nut in place, reach for the middle two strings. So I'm going to start with the D followed by the G. So you put your nut in place where it needs to be, and then we're going to go with the D first. So I'm going to line up all my posts in the right place, make the job a bit easier for me. So that's with the hole pointing at me, so I can run the string through pretty quickly. And then we're going to go in with the D first, and this is going to basically hold the adjustable nut in place. So I pull it through tight, pull it back 1 fret's worth, and start winding on, holding the string taut, and then I let it go over. The held string goes over the loose string first time round, and as the loose string comes round, I yank it up and push the held string underneath the loose string the second time round and let it just resolve itself at that point. And then I will take my pliers and snip the string right there. So then the G next, just to balance out the adjustable nut. Now, having taken the bridge off and done some cleaning, taken the saddles off and stuff, there's every chance that they've all moved, so I'm going to need to be careful to double check and readjust my playing action back to where I had it when I did the leveling. But the good thing about this is, of course, so long as you go back to where you had it when you did the leveling, the end result will be the same. The neck and everything will happily go back to that place, because we've set it up for that action with those strings. Now, of course, if we change strings at any point to a heavier gauge, then the one thing that's likely to happen is, in fact the only one thing that's likely to happen, is that it may well cause a little bit more curvature in the neck, a little more relief. So the heavier strings you go, the more they'll be pulling on the neck, and therefore the more of a curve you might get. And you might want to, if you change your string gauge, you might want to keep that in mind so that you can remember to adjust your truss rod to dial out some of that increased curvature if it bothers you. And I do recommend to all guitar owners, no matter how much you like to bring your guitars to people like me, the one thing you really should be able to do yourself is regular checks and adjustments on the neck relief, because that's something that, I mean, the manufacturer gives you the ability to do that because they know that your neck is going to change, is likely to change all year round in response to changing environmental conditions. So they want you to be able to straighten your neck out if it becomes more curved over the winter, and if it flattens out too much in the summer, they want you to be able to dial some curvature in so that you don't end up with buzzing frets that won't play. Because if you lose, if the neck flattens, you lose very quickly, can lose your space that the strings need to rotate, that we've kind of carefully set up in this action setting. But if the neck changes shape relatively radically, which to change radically it needs only the tiniest amount of actual change, so that given that it can change relatively radically thanks to the environmental changes, then you very easily could find yourself in a position of having buzz and not being able to play the action that we set up for it. So, and that applies to any guitar, all year round. So, you always, the one thing you should learn, teach yourself and become comfortable with is making adjustments to your truss rod. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double check the playing action and dial that back to where I want it, should it have changed through my removal of the bridge. So I'll just double check. So it might be a tiny fraction high, if anything. 1.5. That's a bit. It doesn't have to be perfectly in tune at that point, but it's good to be tighter rather than slack to do this checking. So a smart person would say, well, put it in tune then. Yes, you're right. That is the better way to do it. Okay, so this is actually just about right. So it hasn't moved. Good. So now I can put it in tune. We'll get it close to being in tune. Look at that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, while I'm here, before I stretch this time, I'm going to just check the intonation, get it as close as I can before I do the stretching. So, nice, that works, no rattling. So I'm just going to do the intonation. The intonation on the guitar is a physical property. It's a distance between the front edge of the nut and the apex of the saddle, and for each string it has to be a slightly different length. So each string requires a slightly different length. It's not far off. Let's leave that for a minute, come back to it. We'll do the stretching now. Yeah, so each string has to be a different length, and goes in a pattern. So generally, the thicker the string, the more extra length it needs in its playing length. So there's a notional or nominal scale length that all the parts of this guitar are built in accordance with, and it's a 6/48 scale length, 6/48 millimeter scale length, which is the standard scale length for your Strat or your Telecaster and your Telecaster. And so all the parts are made in accordance with that to work together with that. That's why you have some standards, because otherwise nobody could make anything. Everybody was making their own scale length. So what I'm doing, by the way, is I'm stretching out the strings now to get all the slack out of them before we get into playing the guitar, before you get into playing the guitar. Anyway, yeah, so each string requires a slightly different total playing length, all based off a nominal. So the nominal is 648 millimeters, but actually that sort of applies pretty much just to the high E, which tends to be about 648 millimeters, and the rest tend to stagger or go backwards from that a little bit longer. And the way they go longer tends to be that the thicker they are, the further back they need to be, relatively speaking. And if they're made of wound construction, need a little extra distance too. So in truth, you get, on a 3 wound 3 plane set, on a 3 wound 3 plane set like this, you tend to get the intonation runs in 2 groups of 3. So you get the shortest one, the thinnest string, next shortest, the B, next thinnest string, next shortest length is the G, and then because the D is wound, it jumps forward of the G because it's, I don't quite get it really, I suppose it's thinner, and no, it's probably, well, it just does. The D jumps forward of the G normally, and then the A steps back from that, and the E steps back again. So the E ultimately is the longest string overall in the whole sequence, and the high E is the shortest, and the others in 2 groups of 3 in between, and that's usually how it works. If you have a wound G, then that varies, you get a slightly different pattern, and if you have any other kind of strange combinations, you have to make sure that your bridge saddles are adjustable to accommodate them. But wound G is usually the most common alternative. Some fixed bridges, like tunematic style or what do they call them, wraparound bridges, some of them are pre-compensated, so they don't accommodate those changes, which isn't great. Okay, so I'm going to do another quick final check on the intonation and any final tweaks that are necessary. I'm not going to be playing this guitar tonight because I want to go home and get some tea. Tea? Whatever that is. So the great thing about the intonation is the way we do it, the way we interrogate it, is by sound. Now, I'm going to show you something that will hopefully make a bit of sense of this intonation thing, because some people get quite vexed by it. Okay, now watch this. Thank you. So we start by pinging the 12th fret harmonic on the note we're interrogating. And then we fret it. So we tune it to the 12th fret harmonic. So let's say we start here. So we do 12th fret harmonic, we tune that up to the E, and then we fret it. Now you can see that's just about right. However, I can fret it and make it wrong. So the problem with intonation is that if I hit it lighter than you, I might set it for how I play. Now that's saying it's sharp on the B, which says it's too short a string, so it's going to ask me to take the B backwards, which will raise it in pitch for a minute until I get it back there. So I'll drop it back down to close to B, then home in on the 12th fret harmonic tune to B again. That's still showing up as slightly sharp, so I'm going to drag this back a bit further. Now if I do that, I'm going to check the G now, because the B is looking out of place. Now the G is looking pretty sharp too, so I'm going to pull the G back even further. I'm going to try that again. Tune it back up. Close. For some reason this is not ringing through properly. Oh, that's okay, it's because it was down there. I couldn't see it. I've got my frame of my stand in the way. Okay, so that's fine. It's my high E that needs to come back now, and I'm pretty sure we're in the right place now, which means my D has got to come back quite some way, as has my A and my E. So while you just hang fire, I'll bring these back, and I'm now running out of adjustment room on the E, which is probably just enough to get in there. So let's go to D. When you first hit a note, especially on the thicker strings, the note usually plays slightly sharp first. It settles down to the true note. See that? So that's good. Good. Right, well that's good, that's all done, and you can see, if you look up close, you can see that's actually at the limit of its low E intonation room. There's no more spring compression room, and that's perfectly intonated now to the lowest, lightest touch I can possibly give, which is what we hope works. If you grip this guitar, or you fret harder than me, you can easily make the notes go sharper than I made them go, in which case my intonation won't be the same, and you might need to alter it. And I think sometimes people get a bit misled or upset by that if they grab hold of the thing and go, hang on a minute, it's not intonated. Well, it is intonated for me. It may not be intonated for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's a very high likelihood that it's not intonated for you, because we don't all press the strings the same. Okay, so having finished now, I'll just reality check everything. Oh, there's one more thing to do. Let's do the, sorry, that doesn't help you, does it? One last thing to do. We put the what you can call it in the arm in, which is not my favourite kind of arm. It's a wind up arm, which is a shame, but in goes the arm. And so even when it's done, it's got that little bit of movement. Now what I want to do is I'm basically aiming to slack the, it's not easy to do with that in the way, I want to slack the tremolo screws in the back out far enough so that we get the lightest possible touch for the downward bend. Now what I don't want to have happen is for this back end of the bridge to lift up when I do a bend. So I'm going to first of all keep undoing it and testing the bends until I can just start to see the back of the plate lifting up on a big bend. Basically almost there. What's that? Anyway, so that's it set at its lightest point. Sorry, you can't see that. Its lightest point, so that I can now get a little bit of tilt on it with the least amount of tremolo arm depression, but so that when I bend a string up there, it's not lifting it off the back of the deck. I can't bend it up, and because if it was too loose, I could bend a note and this thing would tilt forward, and the rest of the, or any open strings would go out of tune at the same time, which is something you have to learn to live with when you have a floating tremolo, or you're using the tremolo in float mode, because any droning strings that are ringing, or open strings that are ringing, maybe as a drone string, they will basically, as you bend a note, it will cause them to go sharp as well, which can be quite a weird thing if you're not expecting it. So I'm just putting the back plate on and we're done. So I will give this a quick run through at home to make sure everything's good. But I'm sure it's going to be just fine. Bum, bum, bum. Lovely, all lovely and clean, ready to go. The pick guard's a little scratch, but then it was. Nothing we can do about that. So thank you for watching. That concludes the Made in Mexico with the adjustable nut, Tusq string tree, lowered action, slightly stabilized, much more stabilized, what's-its, pickups, fixed thingy, jack socket, and cleaned up bridge, and action all set to a nice low playing action. Okay, we are all done. Thank you for sticking with me, and I'll see you later this week. I've got so many guitars to do, it's unbelievable. I've got about 8 sitting at home to fill this week up, so there's going to be a lot to do, including one particular one I can't wait to get hold of, and that is James's one that he made with his late father many years ago. And it's a big Les Paul custom thing that he made, and he hasn't been able to ever get it to play decently. So my mission will be to turn it into a playable beastie, and I'm quite confident I can do that. I haven't had a close look at it yet. Also finishing off sometime this week is going to be this one, so I've got myself pretty much ready. Pickups back in, widened or enlarged, scratch plate ready to go. I've actually got a set of parts under here ready to go back in when I'm up to it, but I've also got some new ones coming, but I think I'll try and do it with the existing parts. Meantime, see you again soon. Thanks very much for watching.